Exactly 6:30. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Radnor Township Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee meeting. And our first order of business will be nominations and election of chair and vice chair. Do I hear any nominations, concerns?
Eve Palantonio.
I'll second that.
As?
President.
Okay.
Chair,
Comes first.
as chair.
As chair. All right, there's a motion that has been seconded. Any discussion? All right, hearing no discussions, is there a vote? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, I think. Is there a motion for vice chair?
Yes, I make a motion, I thought you were going to make a motion, that Cheryl Tamola be elected our vice chair.
I second
I know you can.
Motion was
Democracy.
made and seconded. Any discussion on Cheryl Tamola as vice chair? Hearing no discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried unanimously.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Next order of business is the introduction of the new members, Jim Greenfield and Rick Barker. We're very pleased to have them on our board and working with us. Jim spent many years on the Planning Commission, and he was on mostly when a lot of us were on as well.
Yep.
And very good real estate attorney, and he'll be keeping us, hopefully, in lock and step. So welcome, Jim. And Rick Barker, everybody I think knows from his great work on the Garrett Hill Steering Committee and chairing all those meetings, and we look forward to his participation and everything he's learned through the past couple years as well. And working with that group, I think is going to be a great marriage, so to speak, on both organizations getting together and sharing some information and move forward. So thank you, Rick, and welcome.
Thank you. Would you like me to make just a few comments?
Sure, whatever you want to do.
Again, thank you for the welcome. I tried to write this down so it'd be semi-coherent. The Garrett Hill Implementation Committee and the Radnor Township Implementation Committee have many overlapping roles and tasks. With the creation of the Garrett Hill Implementation Committee, the implementation of the Garrett Hill Master Plan is now the specific venue of the Garrett Hill Implementation Committee. However, the Radnor Township Implementation Committee is charged with, again, many similar and some identical responsibilities. I believe both committees will rely on members of the other committee to provide information, expertise, and support. Part of my role as member of this committee will be to facilitate the communication between the two committees, help create synergy, and help coordinate the similar efforts. In addition, Steve, as you know, you've assigned me to be the team leader of the second section of the comprehensive plan, housing, and the 2010 initiatives for that are developing a master list of diverse areas, noting the characteristics that make it unique, and review existing ordinances that may adversely affect the goals of that section. And I'd also like to say that the Garrett Hill Implementation Committee will hold its first meeting on April 20th, 7 p.m. here at the Township Building. And we have already organized working groups as follows: grants and funding, and coordinating with the nascent Garrett Hill Community Enhancement Trust. That'd be Nancy Line-One, Jim Cornelia. The gateways, the western, eastern, northern, and crosswalks, as well as what we refer to as the spillway or the SEPTA rock slope. That'd be Jerry O'Connor and Bob Adams. Park improvements, Betty Lou Norsini, Leroy Turner. Streetscape and facade improvements, including the Route 100 station. That's Phil and Nancy. What's Phil's last name? Phil R. Phil R. and Nancy Line 1.
Wow.
Parking strategies, that's tagged to me. That includes permit, employee shared, municipal, and then consideration of historic preservation and or design criteria. That's Phil R. again and myself. And again, thank you for the welcome.
Oh, you're welcome, Rick. Thank you.
I have one question. Would you tell us again what time that meeting is for the
Yeah,
Garrett?
thank you. That is at 7
Okay.
here
thank
at
you.
the Radnor Shire Room, and that is April 20th.
What kind of day is that, Rick?
It's a Tuesday.
That's a Tuesday.
Okay.
Well, we meet, generally speaking, the third Tuesday of the month, and we're meeting quarterly now.
Excellent.
And these meetings are on the Radnor website.
Great. Thanks, Rick. And
You're
Jim,
welcome.
thank you as well. I sent around to everybody and the report that we're going to give to the Board of Commissioners at the April 12th meeting, which is an update of 2009 goals and accomplishments and what we plan to do heading through 2010 and beyond. And if there's, I think we still have time. If anybody sees any glaring errors or omissions or anything they want to add, please let me know, because I'm sure we can amend that and pass that on to Bill Martin, who will pass it on to the Board of Commissioners.
Steve, do you
yes.
think we should update institutional in view of the lead article in today's paper?
That's not a bad thought. I have not seen the article and what it says.
Well, when you get it to me,
but maybe-
that's on institutional.
Right.
I'll tell you what it says.
And maybe, if anything, maybe we could just slide an addendum to that
Yep.
section
Yep.
instead of redoing the whole thing.
Yep.
But
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
I don't see
absolutely.
any problem with that. Does anybody see a problem if we amend that to the
No.
state-of-the-art, real-time situation? Okay,
I think that the report is very well done.
good, thank you. All right. The next item on the agenda, I know we've talked about this, is, and I think Jim Greenfield will help out a lot with this task, is really looking at some of the ordinances that are either outdated or we can tighten up, and going through the process of getting the right language in there and passing it up to the Board of Commissioners, hopefully get it introduced and passed down to the Planning Commission and go through that normal sequence. One of the ideas we discussed was forming, again, a subcommittee, for lack of better words, with members of the Planning Commission, as long as we're within sunshine laws and everything else, to at least formulate, the topics that we can review and the language that we can go forward with that. I know Commissioner Nagel has expressed interest in that as well, which is a good thing, but I think sooner than later we should do that, and I'd like to see that, so hopefully we can get that organized sooner than later and just start moving forward. I think a couple of things that are most important, and speaking of institutional, is the requirement for institutions to provide a 2-year long-range strategic plan, or whatever you want to call it, which gets updated every 2 years, or when an institution comes before the township with the land development plan, they have to present that that document then. The trouble with that is, I think we all know, is, and Jim explained this a little bit better too, is that legally, we're not sure what we can do, and if it has teeth, if it can get teeth, or if there's a way to make that better. But that's one of the initiatives. And the other one I'd like to see moving relatively fast as well is possibly some sort of ordinance that any new driveway or entrance or exit from an institution starts with the highest use road category, and if that can't happen, then it drops down, as long as it's good reasons. What we don't, and obviously if it abuts a residential neighborhood. If it's commercial against institutional, it might be a different story, or commercial, or institutional butting up institutional is it won't affect either as much, since they're like uses. But the theory behind that is to limit where a lot of the traffic can come through or go through with the neighbors and the neighborhoods, which we all know the institutions are, something that's built in 1840 with today's technology has to get upgraded somehow. And they're just like anything else, any town or any city, things get old and you have to redo them, and times change and so forth. So we understand that development and redevelopment takes place on institution, but how that happens and accomplished, we want to be sensitive to the neighbors that there are. So,
Well, we already have a precedent on that, and that's Eastern. When they did the expansion we required them to create the new entrance to Eastern off of Eagle Road near the corner. And so this is not without precedent.
Good.
Not to overburden this group, but I think we also have had a lot of feedback about the shade tree ordinance needing tightening. So that would be another thing. I see this as a kind of study group, kind of what we did, the three of us, Jim, Steve, and I did with the home occupancy. Kind
That's
of
right,
like
remember
studying, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, we had any discussions with the planning commission about this? Are they on board, or?
I have not. I know that Commissioner Nagel has been in touch with me very informally about mixing
doing this,
ideas, and I
okay.
think we're all on the same page with that. So, judging from our board's discussion tonight or how we want to move forward, I would contact Commissioner Nagel and say, look, our group is willing to do X. You know, let us know if we can, if you want us to, if you want to change it, or whatever you want to do. But we'll pass that on. So, is there any discussion about that approach?
No, that's fine. I mean, there's a great need for this initiative, so I fully support
I
it.
think it's a really good idea, and you'll rely upon volunteers from the planning commission to say they're interested in doing this as well?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope
That
they
way,
do.
I think the more people we have that can give input based on their board experiences
Right.
and so forth.
Yeah.
Not that people that don't have on boards have the experience, that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that, you know, when
Right.
boards, I think there's a big need for, in Radnor Township anyway, for boards to cross-train with each other and interact anyway, so we're all on the same page with issues. And when something is coming up or coming around the corner, we all know and expect it, and not just leave the EAC hanging or
Right.
the shade tree or us or any of the other volunteer groups, and I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think the planning commission is aware of current issues, as it were. You know, the things that come before them that seem to be, and they do seem to come, at least when we were on the planning commission, come in patterns. You know, the same things would keep rising from time to time, so that would be good to get their input. That's great.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And the thing with the planning commission, as everybody all knows, it was on the planning commission, you're locked into looking at that plan.
Right.
And your job is to approve or not approve or table that plan as it is. And it's tough at that situation to step back, take the 10,000-foot view, which is important. I think everybody getting together and really stepping back and saying, oh, okay, now what do we do?
And all of the ramifications of what you do. I mean, the planning commission, you're kind of restricted to what you can look at by the regulations in the subdivision ordinance, whereas we get to look at kind of a broader picture, and that's what we need, I think.
Absolutely.
Steve, would it be your thought that we'd form a subcommittee to deal with all the ordinances, or separate subcommittees to deal with specific ordinances?
You know what, that's an interesting question. I don't think we've gotten that far or even thought that far ahead, but I think the dynamics of how we do that, what we don't want to do is have it so open-ended that nothing gets accomplished. So I don't know if we prioritize right off the bat and say, you know what, let's take a look at, I'll pick institutional, and then commercial, or whatever the case may be. But if we go through and just start looking at different ordinances, might take 6 months before we even pick two that are
Right.
Right.
ready to go. So I don't know, and I would imagine that we're going to try to look at the most sensitive topics now, since they are sensitive, and I'm sure we all understand that most of the time everything is reactionary. No matter how the best laid plans are of an ordinance, there's always something that comes along that you just can't envision or write something for, so you adapt and adjust as that happens. And I think that's what a lot of the cases are now, is, okay, here it is, it hasn't changed in 20 years, but since that time, these 5 things have happened. What do we do? How do we make it better for everybody all the way around? So if anybody has any comments on that approach, or we're good to go.
Well, I was just thinking, one advantage of separate subcommittees is the process will move along faster.
Sure.
Right. I think that the concept that we would be looking for would be to face the fact that we are growing and we're always changing, but to be able to guide that and move it in a direction that we would, through the ordinances, that we would like to facilitate it. So that instead of being obstructive when someone comes in with something saying, no, we don't want that, to instead kind of convince them to go in a direction that we would all like to see. So
Absolutely.
that would be nice.
Okay. Any other comments on that or discussions? Okay.
Sounds
Moving along, we have committee reports, and we'll start off with Environmental and Housing, that's Robin Mann's group. She is not here, unfortunately. And what I'll do is, when I get her report, I'll make sure I email it around to everybody and a copy to Matt Bauman so he can do with it as he seems necessary. Next item is Rick Barker's, which is a housing demographics and socioeconomics. It's all you, Rick.
Well, again, as a new member of committee, I don't have any report to make. I did, I have, of course, read the comprehensive master plan, and I did read over, this report. I don't know if you want me to relate these goals or read these objectives again. The specific initiatives for 2010 listed here are develop a master list of diverse areas noting the characteristics that make it unique, and review existing ordinances that may adversely affect the goals of the housing section. And that's a task that I think that with the experience at Garrett Hill, something that I think I can accomplish for the committee. However, beyond the notes that I've scratched on the report here, I have nothing else to offer.
That's fine, Rick. We understand it's your first time around here with this, and it's no problem. Just understand that however you want to structure your subcommittee, you can get whoever you want, resources that you need, I guess, as long as it doesn't cost any money. But reach out to whatever groups you want to do to help out with, and just keep us all informed.
I've also noticed that in the various other sections, there's very similar.
Yes.
Particularly I think the land use, Dottie's section.
Right.
And I think the first step I'll take is ask Matt Bauman about, whether his GIS system could somehow help facilitate that, or is this entirely done on the ground?
And that's fine, and even collaborative effort with Dottie, whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
totally separate.
and I know she's got the planning background, so I'll start communicating with her about what her ideas are and how to proceed with the things that overlap. I'm just looking at these notes here. Well, again, just off the top of my head, and again, using the Garrett Hill experience as my lenses, which may or may not be useful overall. One of the things that I would look at is does the zoning match the pattern of development, and is the pattern of development something that we'd like to preserve? Again, I've talked about neighborhoods that we refer to as Little Chicago, Banjo Town. These might be similar to Garrett Hill, and also sections of Garrett Hill.
Sure.
These might be areas to look at and see if, again, the existing zoning ordinances could adversely affect the goals, which is to preserve and maintain our existing housing stock and its diversity. And I think that's pretty good for me.
And also, Rick, you took over for Rick Ulo, who
Right.
unfortunately left the township and is doing well in South Carolina, I hope. And he's surely missed in the township and on this board. He had done some pretty good preliminary work.
He shared that with the Garrett Hill committee. I will make efforts to obtain the research that he did.
Okay.
And I do know from our experience with contacting him for the Garrett Hill committee reasons that it's difficult. He is working for a company who, among other things, I'm sure, makes the materials that they use to make the vehicles IED proof.
Wow.
And thus, sometimes you're trying to get a hold of him, and he could be in Afghanistan or Iraq.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Oh, wow. Well, if and when you do talk to him, tell him we said hello. And
I will.
Obviously, to be safe.
Yeah.
But again, he had a good baseline.
No, he did. He did.
To start with.
He did. And I'll see if again he can make that available to me.
Okay. Thank you, Rick.
As an aside, one of the things that concerns me about the housing, and I think you and I have talked about this before, but I really think that we should look into form-based codes. which keep the visual impact of what's there, whatever new development there is. It's about the form of what you see that makes you comfortable and feel comfortable in Garrett Hill, and to be able to replicate that. And it's a proven thing, and it's, you know, if you go on the American Planning Association website, there's explanations of it, and you know.
Yeah, I could just say that this is one of the things that we would have liked to do.
Right, I
In
know.
Garrett Hill.
Well, maybe we
We
can
did
keep
some
going.
things that went towards accomplishing this in Garrett Hill. However, the scope of the grant did not permit us to
Right.
put as much effort into that area as we would have liked.
Right.
So again, here's the overlap.
Right, there's times on our side, though.
Yeah.
We can just keep doing it.
Thanks, Rick. Next item is Al Murphy's, who was not here either. It's Business and Economic Development. Again, any report will be forwarded on to this committee and to Matt Bauman. Next item is Transportation and Circulation. Cheryl.
That's me. Well, today I went to the Regional Safety Task Force meeting of the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, which is wonderful. I received a great deal of input from them. They have a program tracking how safety is being improved, and there were people there from the 5 counties in New Jersey, 4 counties in New Jersey, and the 5 counties in Pennsylvania, people from PennDOT, New Jersey DOT, all of them trying to bring pedestrian safety and bicycle safety awareness to drivers and vice versa. Today's major topic was distracted driving.
Whoa.
And as we all know, they say that, you know, 3 in 10 people are on the telephone. Well, in my personal opinion, it's a lot more than that. And apparently, this is my little bit of numerical engagement that I got out of it today. Only 2.5% of people are capable of multitasking. And everybody who's driving on the phone thinks they're part of that 2.5%. And you can't, and it showed the accident rates for people who are on the phone, even the non-handheld kind. So one of the things that's very important in the pedestrian and bicycle awareness is the idea that you really have to be attentive. And I notice when I walk that people who are on the phone are often looking for a gap to introduce themselves into traffic, and I think that was quoted by Sam in the paper today. But people are looking for a way to get into traffic and not noticing other things because they're also on the phone and they've probably got kids in the back, you know, all that kind of stuff. So the idea is to calm that, and there are actually programs in place to start cracking down on people speaking on the phone and having other distractions while they're there, including those moving billboards, etc., that are very distracting. So I'm really excited about being involved with this, and as part of that, on next Tuesday night, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission is having a meeting here in Radnor Township at 6:30 p.m., and they are examining, as they do all over the region, a section of Route 30. They began in Overbrook and then went on to Lower Merion, and now they're in Radnor. They're going to come to Radnor next week. And it's about a coordinated effort to organize what it is that we address in the roadway. Not only just the cars and the speed of the cars, but the actions of the cars, all the lane changes, all of those kinds of things, the environmental impact, walkability, traffic mobility, streetscapes, and it's not, I think sometimes we think it's going to be one size fits all, but it's not. Each area has its own set of problems, and we're going to try to address the impact of the people coming off the Blue Route so quickly, and I'm feeling frustrated when they get to Wayne, and all of the outgrowth of that is that people are cutting through our neighborhoods. So there's going to be a whole lot of discussion about those things, and it's going to go from 6:30 until 9 with individuals from with a great deal of expertise coming from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. And if any of you don't know what they do, they are essentially the funnel for federal funds for highways and every other transit in general, any kind of transit. So they have a great deal of expertise and a number of people who are interested in what they call complete streets, where we accommodate the bicyclist, the walker, the driver, everybody all together, and the environment. So I'm hoping that anybody who's hearing this will come to that meeting because they're interested in hearing what we have to say, as is DVRPC and this other thing, tracking house safety. If you have suggestions or ideas about ways to improve the safety along our major corridor, Route 30, bring your ideas to this group, and they will. They're the people who have the power to make a difference because PennDOT is also beholden to them, which is a good thing. So.
Thanks, Cheryl. Question, is there anything that can be put down that we can pass on to the Township's Public Safety, I guess, Committee, that they can use as well? I'm sure they're up to speed on all the topics, but
Right.
the good suggestion and so forth, if there's a way we can
I have these
interact.
pamphlets.
Okay.
Some of these are from New Jersey, but essentially, I'm trying to get the township to put on the scroll. There's always something like rolling through there. Things like to be careful for, like what pedestrians' rights there are, what drivers' rights there are, what their rules and their responsibilities are in dealing with it. So this whole process is about raising awareness so that we all treat each other with more civility on the roads. And so I'm hoping that Radnor will be an early adopter of this kind of behavior.
Excellent.
Uh-huh.
The brochures
Right.
is the Township going to look at that and
Yes.
develop something, you think?
Now,
or-
PennDOT didn't have them today, so these are from New Jersey, but one of them is like driving for seniors. Just things that seniors ought to do, like, and one of the first suggestions is leave 5 minutes earlier. Well, I think everybody in the universe ought to leave 5 minutes earlier, because then we'd have less speeding, but be that as it may, those are the kinds of practical things that are in these, and they're pretty interesting points that we need to really start paying attention to. And it's going to be the same kind of awareness raising that we did with seat belts. People used to not use seat belts and it was punitive, whatever. Now, everybody does it because they know they're safer with a seat belt on. Well, we're hoping now that people will know that they're safer by not talking on the phone while they're driving, by paying attention to the road. Invariably, something like 43% of the accidents that people are involved in have some kind of driver distraction involved with, either playing with your radio, putting a CD in, talking on the phone, all those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that we'll be able to be an early adopting community of these kind of efforts.
Great. I know, Rick, you had some
Yeah,
information.
Steve,
on
I just wanted to add
DVRPC.
something about the DVRPC meeting. Again, I believe that's Tuesday, April 6th.
Yes, thank you.
6:30 to 9 p.m. here at the Radnor Shire Room. And this study area actually includes the area a mile north and a mile south of Route 30.
Right.
So it's more than just Route 30. This would also include Conestoga Road. And I have a link to an interactive map that they have on their website where people can post comments.
Right.
And they can actually also
Thanks for doing this. Yeah,
use a mechanism to draw a line or a shape. That link is www.dvrpc.org/US30.htm. I'll say it again. www.dvrpc.org/corridors/US30.htm.
Corridors with an S, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Cheryl. Where's my list? Next list, open space, Mr. John Fisher.
Okay, Steve, I'm going to give my report up front here.
Sure.
The principal task that the subcommittee is working on is the extension of the existing Radnor Trail across Radnor-Chester Road into this area. This is a plan that was prepared by Bob Thomas, who's the township's consultant, and the trail would go along the existing right-of-way, and then when you hit the Blue Route, would go down along, essentially along the sound barrier. Unfortunately, when we get down to Ithan Creek Road, we have to go out on the road for a portion of the trip because there's a house right here that really is right up against the sound barrier. And then we need to get an easement through here, which would either bring us down to the Conestoga Road area and or go through the existing deer tunnel underneath the Blue Route. One of the principal purposes of this is to open up this portion of the township for people to be able to use the trail without necessarily having to drive to a parking area. Tom Blomstrom, Bob Thomas, and I had our second meeting with PennDOT earlier this month, earlier in March rather, and there are 5 things that we need from PennDOT. First, we need permission to use the remainder of the existing right-of-way of the old P&W. That does not seem to be a problem. That's solely a permitting issue. The second thing we need from them is permission to either cross Radnor-Chester Road or tunnel underneath Radnor-Chester Road so that people on the existing trail will be able to access the extension of the trail. And again, from PennDOT's standpoint, this does not seem to be a major issue. It's, again, just a permitting issue. Obviously, if we have to tunnel underneath, which is a desirable way to go from a safety standpoint, that adds a considerable portion of the cost. I think we can probably do, without tunneling under, we can probably do this for maybe $200,000, $250,000. If we tunnel under, it probably adds another $500,000 or $600,000 to the cost. The third thing we need from PennDOT is the township bought the Leeming track over here, which would potentially be used for parking for the trail. Unfortunately, the Leeming track does not abut the trail, so we would need to provide access through this property, which PennDOT owns, in order to come up to the trail. And the PennDOT staff didn't seem to have a problem with this. The one thing they wanted to check was they didn't know why PennDOT had purchased this property in the first place. So they just wanted to check and make sure that the reason for purchasing it wasn't something that would be prohibit us from really using it for access. The fourth thing we need is an easement through the right-of-way here. Now, the yellow area is the ultimate right-of-way for the Blue Route. This is a problem with the staff because apparently you cannot have easements through the ultimate right-of-way. You can have easements that cross the ultimate right-of-way, but you can't have easements that go through the ultimate right-of-way. So the staff was trying to find a way to kind of solve this problem because we will need to have the trail kind of come down this way. The fifth thing we need from them is permission to use the deer tunnel. And when we met with them, they had not gotten word back from Harrisburg as to whether that was going to be permissible or not. We're hoping that it is because this is probably a key access point. We will be scheduling another meeting with PennDOT to keep moving this process along when they get answers to the deer tunnel and whether there's some way that we can deal with the easement through the right-of-way. The same day, Tom and I met with the facilities committee of the school district because right up here, this is Martha Brown's Woods, which the township, school district owns. And we will need an easement through the top portion of this property where you might say, looking at this, well, why don't you just run the easement through here? And the reason we want to run it through here is because of the contours of the land. This is really the high point. So if you go from here to here on level ground, you will be going around the high point, and this is what people will do, regardless of where the easement goes. So we might as well put the easement where the ground is flattest, and that will also help with any erosion that's created when you build the trail. The facilities committee, which is comprised of 4 of the 9 school board members seem receptive to the idea. They asked Leo Burnaby, who's Director of Facilities for the school district, to go back and research a couple of issues, including whether there are any deed restrictions on Martha Brown's Woods which might have an impact on granting us an easement. So as soon as we get word back from Leo, I think we'll be able to nail down that. We also need to, as soon as we can get all of this resolved, work out an easement through here to provide, to finish the trail down to Conestoga Road. So we still have a fair amount to do. The other project that I want to get started on, it's at some point in the not too distant future, is the big enchilada in all of this, which is to use the Blue Route, the P&W corridor, the Route 100 corridor here, which was designed for 4 tracks, but only 2 tracks were ever built. So there is room certainly to put a trail, and this trail would take you all the way down to Center City, would connect with East Coast Greenway, with the Schuylkill River Trail, which will be going through the city, and it's a fantastic opportunity. This is going to take years to develop. The Schuylkill River Trail took 20 years to build. We all know how long the 2.3 miles of the Radnor Trail took. So we need to start a discussion. As far as I know, nobody has talked to SEPTA, for example, that we certainly would need their permission. Nobody's talked to the abutting landowners, Haverford Township, the city of Philadelphia, as you get farther east on this trail. So I'd like to get the commissioners to give us the authority to start talking to some of these groups. And that is my report.
Thank you, John. On that permission from the Board of Commissioners to start talking to other people, why don't you write something up and submit it on behalf of, because you'll know what you're asking for,
No,
and to
I'll be
Commissioner
glad to do that.
Nagel and Commissioner Curley. At least we can get that ball rolling. I do have a
Okay.
couple more questions,
Me too.
John. Is there grant money out there for the 200 or 250,000, or how's that work?
There probably is grant money, but it's difficult. The Route 100 corridor, if we do that, the grant money is, I mean, that's the low-hanging fruit because you're dealing with multiple counties, and the trail really goes someplace. This is difficult because this is a very short area and it doesn't really connect communities. So I think there is money out there, but it's not going to be that easy to get.
Okay. The leaming track where the curb cut would be for cars coming in and out of there, was there much discussion about that, of right turn only going out of there or whatever?
No, we haven't gotten to that level of
Okay.
detail with PennDOT.
Did they have much concern about that? Did it come up, or?
Well, it didn't even come up
Okay.
because we were really talking about the parcel that they own.
Right. And-
Okay. Or even that parcel?
Right.
Well, there wouldn't be a curb cut there because
Yeah.
the curb cut would be on Leeming.
Right.
So Leeming's
Okay.
over here. So you would park in Leeming and then you would walk this way.
Gotcha.
And then up to the trail. This is, you can see the stream that goes through to the high school property. So this is really, be very difficult to put any kind of a curb cut in here because you really, this is very
It's
low.
wet.
If you're right at this point, you're really looking down about 25 feet
That's
Really?
marsh.
from the ultimate right-of-way here down to the stream bed. It's beautiful.
Okay.
But it's marshy.
But it's very low, and it would not be conducive at all for a
Right.
parking area.
Okay.
Well, that piece was part of the excess right-of-way when the first configuration of the Blue Route. They had in mind a clover leaf.
Well, I think you're right. That was my guess.
that-
That's
that
what I
is it.
told
Yeah,
PennDOT.
right. That
And they
is
just
it.
wanted to check. I mean,
Well,
if that's in fact the case, then this really is excess land.
Right, then when we first started the trail effort, that was what we were told, that was the excess right-of-way for the cloverleaf configuration,
Right.
so.
John, on the deer tunnel use of that for pedestrians, was there any study or thought into, will that change the pattern of the herds? You know, other 3 deer use it or 300? Does anybody have?
I
any
don't think
idea?
anybody knows.
Right, it's like 40 feet wide.
No, I know that, but if,
Yeah,
I mean-
it's a good-sized tunnel.
Right,
yeah, but I'm sure they're not going to say, okay, deer, you stay to the right, we'll go to the left.
right, they do have directional signals
Yeah,
there. Right.
the point being that
Right.
if people are walking through there, they're not going to use it, so where do they go?
Well, if you're concerned, the scent of humans using it on a constant basis, whether that would affect the deer pattern. I don't really know the
Okay.
answer to that.
No, I don't know either. I was just wondering if it came up in discussion. And the last thing, if you can, when you can, just real roughly, if you have a larger part of where this Route 100 would connect somehow, just with a highlighter, I'd be interested to see how that whole thing works.
Hold on.
Oh, God. I meant for the next meeting.
Well, I do think, oh, there, just get it here, that absent the East Coast Greenway connection, and I know you've talked about this in Garrett Hill.
Okay.
But this excess right-of-way on the R100 line would also connect Garrett Hill to the trail system, if it only even went that far. You know, if you only took it, that last piece, the one that we walked. I think that would be another thing to look at. And then do it incrementally from there down through the township, connecting with Haverford Township, connecting with, whatever.
I think you're absolutely right, but before Rick and John Fisher, Commissioner John Fisher, start to get letters from panicked
I know.
abutting landowners, I mean, we are years
Yeah.
away.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we're just
from
saying.
doing this.
You know,
So this is not going to happen,
No,
Rick,
right, no.
next month.
And we're just talking about long-term incrementally.
Yeah.
Nor are we going to connect up with Philadelphia Schuylkill Trail by tomorrow. But the whole idea is the long-range
Yeah. I mean, we have to
vision.
start, if you don't
Right.
start talking about it, you're never
Right.
going to find out whether it's viable.
Right.
And nobody's ever looked at it to see whether it's viable from an engineering standpoint. I mean,
Right.
Bob Thomas thinks that it
He
is.
enthusiastically thinks it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, well, of course, Bob Thomas would like to develop every trail, and I'm right
Right.
behind him.
Right, me too.
Okay. Thanks, John. Any other questions for John?
No.
Okay, thank you, John.
A nice illustration, John.
Very nice illustration. Next item is historical and archaeological, which is myself and Cheryl, but I'll actually turn this over to you, and I'm sure Rick would chime in as well with some of the overlap with the Garrett Hill historical
Right.
issues.
Well, at the moment, we're really working mostly with Garrett Hill and their historic assets, or their community full of historic assets, and looking to see what the people in the neighborhood are interested in getting involved with. This is very preliminary. And maybe, Rick, you can give us any idea of any feedback you got after our probe.
Well, right now we're talking with the Beechwood Drive neighbors and also the Radnor United Methodist Church, because there's a natural boundary of that section. Jim, you might help me. I'm not sure it's 169 or 167, but there's a historic act that enables local governments to create historic ordinances, and this was the basis for the historic designations that we have now existing in Wayne. So one of the fundamental aspects of the initial explorations in Garrett Hill, and they are just explorations right now, involve this area that has a natural boundary. We also have two other important historic buildings in Garrett Hill, what's referred to as the Converse building where Paris Craft Parker and Beard is, and also what I refer to as the Chetwynd Drive building. I think it's 100 Chetwynd Drive. Sarah, you might know. Yes. These are fantastic old buildings. And although they're close together, those buildings don't really form a natural boundaried area. So there's another issue that comes before us, which is, and other municipalities have dealt with this, how to deal with what's called dispersed historic assets. Mm-hmm. And for that, we'd need perhaps a township-wide boundary. And there are many ways to categorize the various historic assets. And it allows you, again, as people know, this act provides for the regulation of only 4 things. It's the construction, the alteration, the additions, and the demolition. And all four of those. You can choose just one or a number of them, and the degree to which they're regulated is specific to that particular district. So there's a great deal of flexibility, and what we currently have in Wayne is a great deal of protection for these neighborhoods, and the cost of it is simply a trip to the Harb, and it's really a great value, in my opinion, for this township, and we're investigating right now as a preliminary step the Beechwood Drive historical buildings, and we want to see if we can figure out how to include these other historic assets that exist in Garrett Hill, and perhaps a township-wide dispersed historic asset ordinance would be appropriate. And the other thing that dovetails with the housing section and the land use section is the notion that some of these older neighborhoods are not really compatible with the current zoning ordinances, and should we look at adjusting the ordinances to preserve, again, what I've referred to before as the existing pattern of development. Many times that is the historic asset in and of itself, and this condition certainly exists in Garrett Hill in on various streets and areas.
And I might add that we have all spoken with Beverly Barnes, the chair of our Harb, and she is more than willing to be helpful in this effort. She's certainly knowledgeable, and she is more than willing to be helpful with this, and has been involved, of course, in the Garrett Hill work, and the other, and we've worked with her in South Wayne, North Wayne, so I think this is a good dovetail of committees again.
Yes.
I could just add that Beverly came at the very initial phases at Garrett Hill and tried, somewhat in vain, to a certain degree, to explain what this was all about and why it was a good thing. She is a terrific asset to this community, and she is very willing to invest her own personal time beyond her professional. She is at the Delaware County Planning Commission, and I do believe they're historic department. And so she's a terrific asset to the community, and I thank her, and I encourage ourselves as a community to utilize her as a resource, because we have her, and we're very lucky to have her.
It's incredible. We're incredibly lucky. This is true.
Steve, two thoughts with regard to historical issues. One is going back to an earlier discussion about ordinances that we need to consider. I think the demolition of the log cabin at Eastern College, I think, underscores the need to look at some kind of a historical demolition ordinance. I know you can't really, at the end of the day, prevent those kind of demolitions, but this demolition, I think, occurred without really anybody other than the people who issue the demolition permits knowing this was happening, and I think we need to have some ordinance that will give us an opportunity to try to prevent that kind of demolition. The second issue is that someone has approached the Historical Society and the Conservancy for an internship this summer to prepare a historic asset inventory, which I think is something that we really need to follow up on. As far as I know, we were probably going to hire this individual to prepare the inventory.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
Both good comments. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Rick. Institutional, John Simon.
Last week, preparing for tonight, I called Tony McGeorge, who had been running Valley Fort Military Academy until the first of the year, and he was kind enough to put me in touch directly with Bill Floyd, who is the chairman of the board of the academy. And there have been a lot of rumors, urban legends and whatever about Valley Forge and their property. And based on what I had been told, I asked some very hard questions. And he was kind enough to be totally candid with me. They are in, and I would put this in quotes, serious discussion for the sale of the South Campus to Eastern University. According to the paper today, it's 19.4 acres and bounded by Eagle Road, Radnor Road, Walnut.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And despite what Sam Strike wrote today, that someone at Eastern told her that it was very much up in the air, quote unquote, I am led to believe from my discussions with Mr. Floyd and his references to David Black at Eastern, that this is well down the road toward being a fait accompli. He did tell me that David Black has reiterated to him that they, Eastern, are very sensitive of the neighbors, and which they're going to need to be. So that is where they are. The deal, from my perspective, makes total sense to Valley Forge because with their very limited endowment on the one hand, and having a number of their facilities in less than ideal condition, they need the funding to upgrade their present campus. And so from their standpoint, the rumored number of $10 million or so for this real estate would enable them to go a long way toward the improvements that they need. It also, from Eastern standpoint, would allow them to do some expansion of a facility, create a new facility or two. Mm-hmm. And that's what I know.
Okay. Anything on any other institutions or, okay.
Not at the moment, sir.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think one of our, I wouldn't call it responsibilities, but one of our, I guess, mandates is to keep in contact with all the institutions. I think that's puts them on notice that somebody's watching, as opposed to you don't hear about X university or high school or college for 7 years and all of a sudden this happens. But if on a somewhat regular basis there's discussions about where they're headed and even enrollment or lack of enrollment or any changes in the dynamics or of the university itself, it's good to know. So again, when the volunteer groups and even the elected officials, we can all start sharing that information and be somewhat prepared for it and help the situation, as opposed to getting reactionary and also somewhat combative, for lack of better words. But I think it's an important function on our part, and we have to be mindful of a host of issues in that, and one of them obviously is rumors, and because they abound. The Valley Forge and Eastern situation is right in my backyard, and I know that the neighbors for a couple months now have been very anxious, and we're all getting together and seeing some of the options that are out there, and there's some great discussion and dialogue from everybody in the neighbors, and you know, almost by street, each has a separate concern or situation that has happened over the years with either of the institution. I think collectively, that'll be a good, collectively, all the information that everybody brings is a positive situation. And I don't think anybody ever is going to get what they really want to do, but I do think it helps with the process. So having said that, you know, if anybody hears anything else, I'm sure it is what it is. I guess it ties back into, Jim, what we were talking about earlier this evening is some of the ordinances, and mainly starting with the institutional, and see what we can do to either tighten them up and you know, make it fair to everybody, or to or not. But I think it's worth the exercise. So, anybody else have any discussion on institutional uses?
I think trying to create the entrance to this from Eagle Road would be exceedingly difficult because of the grade situation. That it likely would have to come out on Radnor Road. As far, what direction would that be?
North.
North? I would have said west, but that's all right.
Well, that's Radnor Chester Road.
As possible.
It's the west side of the property.
Right, right. You can't
Yeah.
get on the east side because
Yeah.
there's.
Anyway,
Well,
I think this
sorry.
is a deal that is going to happen.
No, it sounds like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much anybody could do about it
Makes
except try to
too
plan
much
for
sense
the.
to both sides not to.
Well, I also know that, and I know this is out of our purview, but any nonconformities that are created by the sale of this property, as an example, the parking calculations of ratio from Valley Forge, which are now using that
Right.
parking
Area in front.
parking area on the south campus in their calculations, as well as the open space and some of their stuff. They obviously can't use what's up near the football stadium, which is in TE Township, so anything I'd say majority of their
Parking.
buildings are in Radnor Township. If they get rid of that, what is the nonconformity that will happen there with the 55% open space that they have to have, as well as the parking? I don't know if anybody's looking into that. I know we're not, and it's not something we're supposed to be doing, but that's one issue. And I know also, and Jimmy, correct me if I'm wrong, it might be good to look at as well and pass this information on. Isn't there something that says institutional use has to be contiguous with each property, as opposed, excuse me, I know that you can have institutionals separate if it's an ancillary use such as the maintenance shed or something like that, but not the institutional portion per se of classroom to classroom or venue to venue crossing over different zoning districts. So again, if that is the case, you know, can an institution that's not separate build on that 19 acres?
Right.
I
It
don't
will.
know, but and that's a lot of the questions that came out with the neighbors again, which is a good thing, and it brought a lot of things to light, which will help the staff at the township, you know, with different ways to looking at this thing, and that's one of the things I'd like to do too with our group,
Right.
is to help provide the staff with some information, good or bad. They could take it or not take it, but the things we learn, and pass it on to them and say, look, this is what we know.
Right.
Add it into your mix. This is one of the resources that we're looking at, and, you know, it's a help that way, so.
Right, I guess everything will come out in the subdivision or land development process. All of the ordinances will be, I guess, scoured for conformity. But it is an interesting thing to think of, having this separated by the township park and the homes there. How are the students going to move between those two areas?
Oh, absolutely.
And,
It'd be a nightmare
yeah.
for the neighborhoods,
Right.
no doubt about it. And
Unless you provide some pathway to get there.
yeah, pathway, roadway, I mean,
Right.
if you have 200, 400,000 seat,
Right.
either auditorium or classrooms or whatever, that's
Right.
a lot of cars. That if John was correct in saying that Eagle Road is not feasible geographically, I don't know if that's true or not, well, that's a lot of cars coming out. They'll just be zipping down some residential
Right, and for a very
roadways
short
that
time.
aren't made for that.
Right, exactly. It's
so-
very curvy there. And did Eastern at any point say what their intention, I know it's very preliminary, but what their intention would be what their intention to build would be there?
As far as I know, some sort of classrooms, and a 200-seat music auditorium. Now, I don't know if that's considered separate, if that's going to be a separate entity.
Or is it a
from the-
music, is that a music classroom?
Is it a
type thing?
music, you
Yeah.
know, you leave from where the log cabin was demolished and have to walk up to this
Right.
thing. I
Yeah,
don't know.
The only place to walk is pretty much on the end of Shimoni, beginning of Walnut, and that's pretty crazy there at Paul
Absolutely.
Road.
And there's a host of factors, too, to begin with. The number that we all heard was $10 million. $10 million is a lot of money for just a 200-seat auditorium. Now you have, I don't know, 14, 15 houses that are there already. Do they remain faculty? Do they become
Right.
dorms? You know, there's a lot of moving pieces that
Right.
I guess nobody really know until something concrete comes across the township's desk.
Right, okay.
So
But it is problematic.
it is. It very is. It's very disconcerting, and it's a big concern to everybody in that neighborhood, which it should be. And the neighbors are so involved and so that it's a very good thing. And it's good to have that type of participation. Again, no matter what anybody's opinion or views are, they're all helpful. So it's a good thing. Nobody's just sitting back, and we're not saying, oh my God, we never heard this, and you have to come to a planning commission meeting, and by that time, it's almost too late. So we're really trying to get out in front and see, again, identify any and all options that would be beneficial to everybody, the two schools and the neighborhoods and the township. And by that, the neighborhood starts all the way up by St. David's train station and goes all the way up to Fairstein, up at TE, and everything around there, so. All right, thank you, John. Any more comments?
Steve, it's not clear to me what role, if any, the implementation committee would play in this process.
Actually, it's very limited role. I think that the role is sharing of information at this point with all the institutions of, you know, some of the directions. If there's conversations by an implementation committee member, if John's heading that up and he stops in at Cabrini and has a meeting and, you know, reports back saying, hey, you know what, enrollment's going to stay the same for 5 years and this and that, and we can't guarantee it, but it's good to know. Or they might come back and say, hey, we're adding an engineering program. And we're thinking about an engineering program. In order to do that, we'd have to do a host of Chinese checkers and so forth and so on. Again, it's not written in concrete, but it's good to know the mindset. So everybody can be prepared, and again, be out in front of the curve and try to make it a positive, and as much as possible to make sure that everybody gets to be a win-win. So,
And I think that most of us, having had experience doing these kinds of things, it would be helpful that the more eyes look at something, the more you can see different aspects of it. So whatever each of us brings to it, you know, not necessarily through the comprehensive, but we know what the comprehensive plan says about institutions. So we need to reinforce those things with those who are planning to develop, I think, and with our own experiences.
absolutely.
Huh? Yeah.
All right, next item
That's
is, I'm sorry.
incidentally, that 19 or less acres are zoned planned institutional.
Correct. Yeah, there's no subdivisions for residential or anything there. It's all,
Yeah, it's
yes.
all
And that was
planned
back in,
institutional.
I think it was 53 when it was the Sullivan House, and it changed from R1 to institutional.
Planned institutional.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, John.
Yep.
Community services and facilities, that's mine. Not much to report. The aim and goal of this group is to, again, to get the nonprofits or anybody that's out there in the center of Wayne, or not even the center of Wayne, but provides a service and provides, and has a building that is good for the township. The way we're looking at that is try to get everybody more together, as opposed to the libraries alone and the fire departments alone and the senior center is all alone, but try to put it together and again see what's a good approach to make sure that each maintains the level of service that it has, can grow the level of services and be, you know, fiscally responsible. The way I look at this is you know, the theory being, say, the library. Some people think, well, the library, if that goes, will the township fold? No, absolutely not. Libraries are, you know, Barnes and Nobles and Googles are taking over that. Could be or couldn't be. But certain parents and so forth, we move out of the library and go to different stages, end up in the senior center, and then other people follow. So the different people that interact with each one of these things, whether it's the fire department, the American Legion, the senior center, the Wayne Arts Center, they all come to Radnor Township for that specific reason, and they all help the town be vibrant. You know, you could go to Citizens Bank Park and to a Phillies game, and it's crazy. There's parking, and there's vendors, and it's fun. You go there the next day, it's empty. So we don't want it to be just a one-horse show, but all these things are equally important. The kids that use the library might buy pizza. The people that go to the retails will do other things. And again, it's to try to make as much this a community global effort for all these people, as opposed to having being out there alone, and bring awareness to it. Younger parents that just use the library, it's a hypothetical, but younger people use the library. They might not be thinking about the senior center, but when you bring all the groups together, you know the importance that they do bring to the town of Radnor. So that's what we're trying to get to. And like my conversations with the heads of all these groups have been very positive. Yeah, it's been very positive. So that's where we are with everything on that.
Well, Steve, several of those groups that you mentioned presented, a month or so ago, a very intriguing plan for the development of what I'll call the post office parcel. Is anything happening with that plan at this point that you can share with us?
I haven't heard anything other than from what was presented. What I heard or conversation was the night that they presented to the Board of Commissioners. Sounds like a great plan. I don't know if that's a 5-year or 10-year. I know it's not next year, but in the meantime, 5 years, it's not that far away, but 5 years is a short enough time that any one of these things can go under. The Radnor Fire Department does a great job. And we all know that if the volunteer base and their expenses start to track downward, well, we'd have to go to a paid fire department, which, everybody knows that. Would increase taxes, and how's that get paid for and so forth. So I think we have to look at now, and if things happen down the road, that's great, but we really can't plan for anything too far in advance, that complex, I should say. So, but no, it would be nice.
Complex is a victim of the economy.
Pardon me? I'm sorry.
No way in this economy that complex can be.
Yeah, right, I mean, right, or anybody, yeah.
Or any developer.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question about the, I didn't really get to read my paper last week. So the concept of forgiving the debt for the library?
That's what they asked for.
Yeah. There was a loan by the township to the library, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure George Stringel or Kathy Muller will
Right, let you know.
I'm trustee on that board, so I should know. My understanding is there was a loan from the township to the library, $500,000. That loan was mainly to look at improving that facility, put an addition on top, or maybe move or whatever, use it for architectural engineering and moving forward with that. And at that time, it was at the initial stage, well, actually, that was the genesis for part of the Keating plan with the post office and everything else. And that never happened. And in the meantime, the building itself, which is township owned, there's a lot of repairs, a lot of capital improvements, from the roofs to the HVAC systems to the lighting and a bunch of other stuff. So the library took some of that money and made improvements on the inside, carpets, paint, furniture, everything that needed to upgrade it to at least make it more friendly for the patrons that come there. And we did a good job. It looks good. The trouble is we can never go on top because the building structure isn't made for that. You can't just put up studs and go and build on top. It's not made for that. anything major is to happen on the site where it is, the library technically have to move to another location. It's tough to bring in cranes and work people and everything else to do a major renovation on that building during the day. Trouble with that is, there's a mandate by the state that the library must remain, if it's closed from one calendar year, from one date to the next date, it loses all kinds of state mandates and state funding and all kinds of registrations and so forth and so on. So you can't just close it down. We looked into renting other facilities. 35,000 square feet in the center of Wayne basically doesn't exist. And if you get it at a steal for $10 a square foot, that's $350,000 plus utilities. You're probably looking at $500,000 a year of additional expenses that aren't there now. So it's complicated. Getting back to your original question was, Keating didn't happen, can't move, can't really build up with it. We need to, those deferred maintenance items have to be completed now. The roof still leaks. There's 3 of the 10 compressors down. There's heat pumps, everything else. We're heading into the summer season, air conditioning. If it's hot, people want to come. Hours have already been cut to help balance the budget. So the idea was, Township, can you forego the $35,000 interest payments that we're paying each year? Because really, it's for the Township's building. The Township has been very, very generous. They give a great deal of money to the library, and it's very much appreciated, no doubt about it. And they've
But
been
it's their
great. Bill
property.
Hagan, Bill Hagan and the staff has done a great job of maintaining that building with the duct tape and bubble gum that they can, but they do a fantastic job. And nobody has any problem with the Township staff or the Township or the Board of Commissioners or the library. It's just a situation. It is what it is. Things don't work. How do we fix it? So do we give back the remaining $240,000 and let the Township do it? Do we keep it and do it ourselves? So it's kind of a mixed blessing. I know Kathy Mulroy, the Executive Director, is now putting a pro forma together that if all the monies have to be paid, here's what has to be cut in the library. Whether it's materials, some of the book circulations, obviously hours would have to be cut. And then everybody's going to have to make a decision, how do we do this? So that's kind of the...
Well, I think that the community appreciates your explanation of it. I think that we just I think people need to hear as much as possible.
Yeah, and
as clearly as possible what's going on.
Sitting on the Township's table, I can understand them and saying, well, where the heck are we going to get X amount of dollars to pay that back, that bond? So it's kind of I don't think it's a situation that's not resolvable. It's just a matter of how do we do it all together.
But it's a struggle. Everybody
lays their cards on the table and see what's best for the community, for the library, and for the Township. So, yeah, I can understand perfectly how the Board of Commissioners are thinking on this. And yeah, you're right. So if we forgive that, well, heck, what are we going to cut?
Right, exactly.
You know, to
It will
balance
be
that budget.
painful.
Yeah.
And everything's painful.
It will be.
Absolutely.
Visually painful.
Yeah, and I think everybody expects that, and we know that, and I think everybody's going to remain professional and nice about it, but here's the 2 deals. How do we proceed? And however we proceed at the end of the day is, that's going to be it. Yeah, no doubt about it. There's no sugarcoating it one way or the other. So,
Question?
yeah,
Well, thank you, Steve.
you're welcome. Existing land use. Dottie Dewey is not here. She did email me, and she asked me to, again, remind everybody about the Tuesday, April 6th DVRPC event, which was already talked about, and so forth. What I'd like to do is add another section to this, and that report, that subcommittee would be, I guess, ordinance review, because I noticed, Jim, you have nothing to do. So I think with board's approval, I'd like to add a category, which is ordinance review, that hopefully you can take the lead on and start the interaction now, get you in the loop with Commissioner Nagel and Commissioner Curley, and see the best way to structure this, best projects to attack right off the bat, and so forth and so on. So if you're willing, I'd like to pass that on to you and let you take the lead on that.
Sounds great. I'm in.
Okay,
Okay.
good,
Thank you.
thank you. And I do think, coming off this institution conversation, if you can get in touch with Matt as soon as possible, possibly about the ordinance about entrances, just to at least get that on the books, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Matt will be back next week.
Oh, I didn't know he was away.
Yep, spring
Okay.
break.
Oh, good for
Family's
him.
away.
Good. Any old business?
Yes.
Okay.
What's ever become of West Wayne?
West Wayne, this is my understanding, is that the history from our standpoint is that what's it called, Cheryl? What's the acronym? Wayne Public Safety?
Wayne Public Safety Association.
The Wayne Public Safety Association came to the Board of Commissioners and asked them if they can solicit Implementations Committee help in drafting and updating their ordinance for the West Wayne
Commercial area.
Commercial area, correct, thank you. So we did do that. We
Yes,
had,
we did.
we had a lot of meetings. Cheryl headed that up from our end, and we came back with what we thought the change from C1 to C1A should be. And they weren't that, actually, we think it's more positive for the business owners, because right now you can't have apartments on top and so forth and so on. So we brought the idea of the mixed use into play, and
Which is a
would
direct
create-
hit out of our comprehensive
Right,
plan.
so, and we left a lot of the language in there, the setbacks and so forth and so on. The one thing we didn't do, and a lot of the people live in West Wayne, is there's a line that goes through the commercial and the zoning district, kind of at the bridge where the
Trail.
trail
Trail
is,
goes across.
right up behind, kind of up to the IAC and across to Adelberger's. And we were asked, change it, do something. Well,
Which we can't.
we can't. That's not our area, and it's not fair one way to the other. Is it fair to make it all residential when is it fair to make it all commercial?
Yeah.
It's not, either way. So we said, you know what? That is really a zoning issue that should go to a different venue. We're gonna leave that as is. So we left everything the same. Just again, change from C1 to C1A. So we handed that back, and I'm not sure if anything else has happened. I know that there was a edited version from ours that was on the Township website. I'm not sure how that got there, and
I think Matt put it on.
okay, Matt put it on. It's not what we recommended, but again, we did our job of doing a recommendation.
Right.
As
We
far as I
made-
know, nothing else is.
Yeah, we
come
made
above that.
recommendations. They had meetings
Yeah.
after our recommendations, after we signed off on it.
Yep.
And I don't think that has been resolved
Yeah.
since then. And I know that it's like just hanging fire in some way. And yet, I think that we did the right thing. I don't think it was our job, and nor did the comprehensive plan ask us to change zoning.
No.
I mean, in our other comprehensive plans, we have been asked to change zoning. That's
Yeah.
how we got public land use, that's how we
Right.
got all kinds of things. But this one in no way asked us to change the zoning between these lines. We were just supposed to foster this development of a more mixed use at the commercial zones along Conestoga Road, which is what we facilitated with our efforts.
Who's the commissioner now?
Tom
Mr. Curley.
I think somebody ought to ask him why this hasn't been gotten completed.
Right, that's a good idea.
Sure, absolutely.
I will do that.
Okay. Any other old business? New business?
Move adjournment.
Public comment?
Oh, Sarah.
Sarah Pilling, you've been sitting here all this time.
I'm Sarah Pilling from Garrett Avenue.
I was glad you were able to find a place to sit.
When we were during the Garrett Hill process, we have two parks, one of which is a park, but it's owned by the school district, which is Emlyn Tennell, although the township owns the front piece of it.
Yep.
Mrs. Walker's old property, and Macrone. And we propose to make the parks open space. We took that to planning, and they did not like the idea of one park becoming open space instead of PLU. This was Macron to protect it. They said it should be done township-wide. And that idea fell down a well someplace. So I'd like to urge John and the implementation committee to begin to work with the planning board to look at this issue of PLU and what we're allowing in it, because I'm not so sure we want a government building or a school or a public art gallery, or help me out, Rick, some of the other things that can be put in it. I think maybe we need to be more protective of our parks, and perhaps the thing to do is to change them to open space rather than PLU. And I'd like to see the implementation committee light a little fire here, and let's all work together and get this done, because there were rumors 2 years ago that Agnes Irwin wanted to buy Macron Park. There were rumors that Agnes Irwin wanted to buy Emlyn-Tinnell Field, and in fact they were renting it, which is fine. But it's too vulnerable.
Right.
You know, all these parks are very vulnerable in our township, and I'd like to see, and it'll require some ordinance change, and it'll raise a few hairs doing it, but I think it's something that we need to be proactive and be looking 20 years out so that we don't lose this land. After all, Keating would have taken that PLU land in his scheme, and there was a tremendous uproar over that.
Do we need to create a new zoning category for open space? Because I don't think there is an open space
No,
category.
that's
No, there
exactly
isn't,
right.
right.
An open space
I-
and have some sort of redefine what you're going to put on a park. Are
Right.
you going to put 200-foot cell towers?
I'd like to respond to that. What we felt when we were looking at this as the Garrett Hill Steering Committee is that what the township really needed was 2 open space categories. One would be, I guess you'd call it a recreational open space that would accommodate what we normally think of as a park. And the other would be a conservation open space to preserve existing woodlands, for instance, perhaps Martha Brown's woods or otherwise. And then, Sarah, just to respond to you, and so the committee can be refreshed, what's allowed on PU is municipal, county, state, or federal facilities, public school, public education facilities, public parks and recreational facilities for nonprofit community recreation facilities, or nonprofit community recreation facilities open to the public, public transportation facilities, public utility facilities, post office, a public art gallery, public parking facilities, a public library, and there's also a caveat here that says that we'll just read. The following uses, when authorized as a special exception by the zoning hearing board, subject to the general standards as prescribed in 28145, and provided that the board shall determine that the placement of such use is of public necessity and that planting, buffering, and other measures are taken to safeguard the character of existing and adjoining districts. And then we have their radio and television towers and related facilities when operated only by a township agency, government agency, or public utility corporations. And again, that may or may not be legally necessary, and accessory uses. So there you
I
have
think it's
it.
something
Oh, yeah,
that
the-
we really need
right.
to look at this for
The
the future.
generation of this was that when we did the 1988 comprehensive plan, all of them were institutional. And there was a fear that an institution would come in and insinuate itself in our open spaces. So it's interesting that we thought we were curing one thing and rather opened something up. And I think the terminology they used is passive and active recreational space. So you could probably have an open space category with both passive and active recreational components to
Yeah,
it.
that's a good suggestion,
Right.
yeah.
But it needs to be looked at.
Okay, thank you,
Thanks,
Sarah.
Sarah.
If you guys
Thanks,
could
Sarah.
take the leadership on it, it'd be,
Absolutely.
let's get the ball rolling.
Yes.
Sure.
Good
Thank you.
thinking.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sarah.
Question?
Jim, is this something that, it sounds more of a legal zoning type of thing.
Yeah.
Jim, do you want to take the lead on this and do
Sure.
some investigating? And
Yeah,
Yeah.
as we put the subcommittee together, we'll
Right.
take a look at that.
Okay,
Is this something we need to talk to the commissioners about first? Because this is also a political question.
Right.
Well, maybe that's the first thing
Yeah.
that we do is,
Well, maybe
Tell
Jim
'em
can
what
be
we're
the lead
planning to
person
do
to
and-
talk to them.
either way, I still think it's worth the exercise of
Yep.
at least vetting it out and telling the Board of Commissioners the situation and here's some possible solutions.
Mhm.
Do you want us to bring them forward or not? But,
Right.
Right.
Sometimes it's hard, you bring a concept, it's hard to say yes or no or whatever.
Right.
But if you bring the concept with some options, it makes it a little bit easier
Right.
to push it through or make a decision.
Right, and give them some kind of thing to say yay or nay about is certainly easier than having them starting to think through without any
Right,
concepts,
exactly,
right?
yeah,
Excellent.
good point.
Question.
Yes,
Next televised meeting, when?
I have that on here, I am not sure. So
I have that here.
can't-
Question
So
mark.
I will be in touch with Matt and circulate that around,
Thank you.
okay?
Move adjournment.
One quick thing, and then you can move your adjournment.
It's not having any luck, John.
Could everybody just email me a quick narrative of what the report was, so I can make minutes and just attach each person's subcommittee meeting, if that's okay? Any other discussions? Motion for adjournment. All in favor? Bang.